Welcome back, college football fans, to another episode of Saturday Showdown, where we are talking college football playoffs round two. It's the time everybody's been waiting for. We get things kicked off tomorrow with the first game of Penn State and Boise State kicking off the second round of the college football playoffs. It should be a good time. Other ball games going on right now as well in between. But I think it's going to be an exciting round. Hopefully, we have some better games this round comparatively to the first round, where kind of all the higher seeds and teams you really expected to win won. And hopefully, this round we have a lot games that are going to be a lot closer. Maybe an upset or two. Who knows? With getting into round two, I would think games are going to be a lot closer, and you have the potential for more of those upsets. So, just in general, how are you feeling about the second round of the playoffs?
Good. I'm excited. I think there are better matchups. There might be a blowout or two, but I think the matchups are better than. I don't think we're going to see blowouts like we did like the first week, where like every one team basically just destroyed everybody. So I think it'll be a better week of football. The first week the first round was still good, but I think this one's going to be better, obviously.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I think it's gonna be one of those things where, like you said, you're gonna see those teams that are more evenly matched. So the competition level should be more on the same level between these two teams, and we'll just jump in right here. First game getting us kicked off on New Year's Eve is Penn State and Boise State in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. In Glendale, Arizona at State Farm Stadium. So you're playing down in Arizona at the home of the Cardinals. In this one, they've got Penn State picked as 11-point favorite right now coming into this game. 11-point spread. And it's, I don't know. I think this game has the most likely chance, like you were saying, to either be you're going to see the most likely chance of a blowout, or you could see the biggest upset, even though Boise State is ranked as the higher seed. This game will get kicked off at 6:30. You've got Penn State 12-2, Boise State 12-1 as the 3 seed, getting that first round bye. And I mean, I think the one thing you got to look at in this game, and the X factor, if you will, to look at is, can Ashton Jeanty do what he's done all season in this game? Because I think that's what you're going to be looking at if Boise State's going to have success against Penn State is, can they establish the ground game with arguably the best running back in college football right now, and which will allow them to hopefully have Maddox Madsen complement that run game with their passing ability.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like it's tough. It's rough to kind of decide what's going to happen because Penn State played really good their first week, right? They played really well. Their defense is really good. Their offense is, especially when it's on, it's really good when it's on. Boise State's not anything to mess around with either. I mean, don't get me wrong, they played lesser competition, but you also can't forget the Oregon game either, where I mean, they basically they did. They kept it with Oregon all game long. It came down to the very end when Oregon, I don't know. I think, like you said, I think what it comes down to is, can Boise State run the football? I'm not saying that Maddox can't pass, right? He has a good arm. He's very mobile, right? But he hasn't been forced to do that all game long, right? He hasn't been forced to do it for two halves of football. They always have a little bit of a fail safe with their run game because people's version of stopping their run is letting Ashton, Jeanty get, like 120 yards a game and like 2 touchdowns. Like that's people's versions of stopping him. So it'll be interesting. I would imagine that Penn State is going to do everything they can to load the box and make Boise State try to beat them through the air. And if they are able to successfully halt Boise State's run game, and force that to actually happen, I don't know. It could get really bad for Boise State. Like, it could get really bad. If they can't run the football, I would say it's probably going to be a blowout, to be honest. Boise State, Penn State, they just obviously, they're in the Big Ten. They play better competition all year long. They're going to get, more recruits, better players. Like, they're just the better team overall, in my opinion. I'm not saying upsets can't happen, right? It's college football, but it's hard to imagine what a Boise State offense would look like without a run game. And against a team like Penn State, I would say it's probably not going to be good.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing, because it's like we're calling this an upset, but Boise State's the higher seed. So it's weird talking about that. But when you look at it, you're talking about Penn State. So a couple facts here. Penn State is top 10 nationally in numerous defensive categories, including 4th against the run at 100.4 yards allowed per game. They held 9 opponents to under 100 yards rushing with a low of 34 against Illinois. And I mean, that is impressive, but you've got to think also, looking at it, how many of those opponents' running backs are the quality or has the success that Ashton Genty's had? That's something you got to factor in. Yes, they've got a great defensive unit, but have they faced a guy like Ashton Genty this season? And I don't think so. I mean,
you're facing. I mean, it's a battle. It's a battle of the best, basically, right? So you have a top rushing defense against the best running back in college football. I mean, that's basically what it is. So you're gonna have that battle. If I had to guess, like, listen, Jonty, he's probably gonna get his right. Like, I don't know if you're gonna be able to successfully hold. Like, I don't see them holding that guy to 30 yards,
especially all 4 quarters. Like,
I just don't see it. At some point in time, he's probably going to break off a couple of decent runs. I'm not saying he's going to break off his 50-yarders that he's going to get some other teams. Not saying it's impossible, right? But a guy like him, when we're talking about the best college running back in football, he's probably going to get his. The thing is like with Penn State's top rushing defense, what do they consider damage control? Because that's all you're trying to do with a guy like this. I've said it all year long. Teams know they can't stop him fully. So they just try to do damage control. What can we possibly do? What is our version of success with him in the run game? Like, okay, guy, like, what do the coaches say? Like, okay, we're going to try to hold him under 100 yards. We're going to try to make sure he doesn't rush for 150 yards. We're going to make sure our version of success is less than 100 yards and only 1 touchdown. Like, you're not going to stop this guy fully on the ground. I don't see that happening. I'm not saying they couldn't do it. I mean, you have a top rushing defense for a reason, but what is your version of damage, your damage control? Because I just don't see them stopping a guy like that. But if they do, I think that's probably it for Boise State. If they're able to successfully stop him, stop him, man, I would say Boise State's going to be in a lot of trouble because I'm not saying they can't throw the football that much, but he hasn't been made to throw the football for 4 quarters.
Right.
He hasn't against another top defense, not only in the run, but in the passing category too. I mean, they have one of the best defenses in college football. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard. I don't know.
I was about to say, and it's tough because, I think in this game, not sure if it matters to him as much, but as far as numbers, I would feel like if I'm Ashton Genty, I'm a little bit more motivated to have success because he's 132 yards short of Barry Sanders' all-time season record. Yes, I know it's in the postseason and it's not all in the regular season, but the fact that he's that close to that number and could possibly get to it or beat it is still an impressive feat, even though it's not in the regular season. But when you look at Boise State's offense, they were 3rd nationally in scoring at 39.1 points per game. But, I mean, if you look at Penn State, their offense isn't, that much lower than that, as they're averaging 439.8 yards per game, which includes over 200 yards rushing and 33.9 points. So they're equally as good offensively. This is probably the biggest test that this Boise State team is going to have, like we said, since that Oregon game early in the season. But, I mean, that is something to say with this Boise team. They're able to keep up with that Oregon team. yeah, maybe that Oregon team wasn't as rolling as what they are now. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a good one. One player to look out for Penn State is their tight end Warren, one of the nation's best tight ends. He lines up at quarterback, running back, different times of the season. Drew Aller put up big numbers, completing 68% of his passes for 3,021 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So it's going to be an interesting game. I'm excited to watch this one just to see if can Genty get it done. Like you said, what is the damage control that Penn State does? Can they shut him down, or does he do what he's done all year, find ways to have success and help this Boise State team advance in the playoffs? So should be a good one that gets kicked off at 6:30 on New Year's Eve. Again, number 6 Penn State 12-2 on the season versus number 3 Boise State 12-1. So now's the fun part. Who are you taking in this game?
It's hard, right? That's such a hard question because I really want to see Boise State win. I would really like that. Keep the Cinderella story alive. I'm going to take Penn State. They haven't faced anyone like Oregon since Oregon, right? That's been 100% the best team they faced. They kept up with them, right? But then after that, they progressively played lower, way lower amounts of teams, compared to the Oregon team. So I'm not saying that they can't keep up with them because they obviously can keep up with a team like Oregon. So I'm assuming they can keep up with a team like Penn State. But, every dog has their day, and I just don't know if this is going to be their day. There's too much to factor in because we talked about, Genty and the rushing game, but like, how is Boise State's defense going to hold up against Penn State's offense? Right? Penn State has a lot of weapons. And like you said, their offense ain't no joke either. I mean, they're putting up 400 plus yards a game. They got Warren, one of the best tight ends. They got Singleton, a very good running back. Allard, one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. So I just think there's too much there for Boise State to stop. I'm not saying that they can't do it. I hope they do. I'll be rooting for them. But in terms of just picking teams, I just think it's too much for Boise State to handle, and I'm going to take Penn State. So,
yeah, I can see that there. I think the question bodes. I mean, we said it. When they played Ohio State, we said it last week. Can James Franklin continue to win the big games here? I mean, that's what it comes down to. He's shown in the past that he struggled at times. This is probably one of Penn State's better teams in the last few years, and this year's the year that if they want to have a chance at potentially making it, he's got to win the big games. But heck, I'm going to take Boise State in this one. I think Genty's going to get it rolling, and he's going to help his Broncos to a quote-unquote upset, even though they're the higher seed. I could be completely wrong, and that's a very likely possibility. But I would like to think that my Broncos are going to get it done.
I hope so. I will be rooting for them. I hope they do win.
So, that'll be a fun game to get us kicked off on New Year's Eve. And then we get things started on New Year's Day at 12 o'clock with the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl with Texas and Arizona State at 12 o'clock. Texas 12-2 on the season. They're coming off a victory against Clemson after that loss in the SEC championship to Georgia. Arizona State, they got the bye, being a top 4 seed, after winning the Big 12 championship game. This game is going to be in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where Texas was where they're at just less than a month ago in the SEC championship game. The spread in this one comes in at 12.5, favoring Texas. Kind of very similar to what we said last week. I think this spread might be generous here, because props to Arizona State for what they've done this season. Incredible. They've had a great year. Two of the best players for them. Levitt, their quarterback, 2,663 yards through the air, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. One of the biggest names as far as being a individual person's favorite is Cam Scatterbo with just his name alone. Had a pretty decent season himself, 1,568 yards on the ground and 19 touchdowns. So he came out and said he thinks he's the best running back in college football. He's good, but it's hard to argue what Genty's done unless he's just saying because he's in the Big 12 and a bigger conference and has done that. And, you could argue that a little bit that maybe the competition that Genty's faced hasn't been necessarily what Scatterbo's faced. But at the end of the day, both two talented players. And then on the flip side of that, Quinn Ewers for Texas. That's the question I think that's going to be part of this game is, he was kind of bailed out a little bit last week due to their run game, but which Quinn Ewers do you get? Do you get the one that just plays okay, can, give you a touchdown or two, maybe a pick? Or do you get the Quinn Ewers that, that we were talking about at the beginning of the year, potentially being a Heisman candidate and, just lighting it up out there? It should be an interesting game, but at the end of the day, it's like we talked about last week with the Clemson game, and I think it's kind of a very similar situation with this game. I think Texas probably will be too much for Arizona State.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, I just kind of look at now I don't want to take credit away from Arizona State, right? They've had a really good season, they played really well, but in terms of teams, right? The best teams they've played would be Kansas State, BYU, and ISU would be the best teams they played. I guess you could throw Utah in there too, but they've kind of had a rough season. Other than that, they've played teams like Wyoming, Texas State, UCF, Cincinnati, who they lost to, Oklahoma State. They lost to Texas Tech. Then you start looking at Texas. Texas has played teams like Georgia twice. They played Vanderbilt, who I think is better than what their record shows. They played the Floridas. They played
a tough Texas A&M team.
They played the Arkansas. They played the Kentucky's, who's tough. Texas A&M was tough. They played Georgia tough twice. They played Clemson. This is going to be the best team that Arizona State has faced, without a doubt. And this is a whole different level, right? Like Clemson, it's just a whole different level. And Texas' defense, and I think their offense, it's going to be a repeat of Clemson in my mind. Clemson had a chance where they could have came back and won, but Texas started to throw that game. In the beginning, Texas was just running away with it, right? I think it's just going to be like that. I just think you have a really good defense and a really good offense, a team that is great on both sides of the ball. And I just don't know if Arizona State is going to have enough firepower or will to try to last for 4 quarters of football. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably going to get I think it's going to get pretty bad.
Yeah, I agree with you in that sentiment. Like you said, not taking anything away at all from Arizona State. Great season for them, making it to these playoffs. It probably helps this 12 team that they got in, and to these players, Scatterbo, Levitt. Even look at their receiver Tyson. Having 1,100 yards on the season with 10 touchdowns. So, eclipsing in that 1,000-yard mark, fantastic things. They played some tough teams, like we talked about BYU, Kansas State, Iowa State. But what does that compare to, like you just said, with Texas going through the gauntlet that is the SEC, having to play Georgia twice, going through these other SEC teams, and making it to the championship game. They're very much a battle-tested team, and I think at the end of the day, like you said, when it comes down to it, Texas is probably going to be too much for Arizona State. Great run for them, and I'll go ahead and give my pick. I think Texas wins here, and I think they probably cover.
Yeah, I think they win. I think it's another 14-point victory for Texas, to be honest. I think they probably win by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. Great run for Arizona State, but unfortunately that probably stops in Atlanta this year. So we'll jump over to the next matchup happening at 4 o'clock. We're going to keep the action going. Dillon, your Ohio State Buckeyes taking on the Oregon Ducks in the rematch. I'll just go ahead and share a little comment right here with you.
Ducks gonna roll.
But But I mean, this is going to be an exciting one. The Rose Bowl, a historic bowl game, historic place, where fantastic games have happened. Ohio State 11-2 coming off that victory against Tennessee, 42-17. Oregon, like we talked about last week, sitting on the bye week. They didn't play. How is that going to affect them? Are they going to be more rested, or are they going to come out a little slow? They got the spread in this game. Ohio State -1. So a coin flip. This is going to be a coin flip of a game. You've got the rematch. Will Howard versus Dillon Gabriel once again. Josiah James, Tez Johnson, those guys for Oregon. Quinshon Judkins, Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State. Going into this game after seeing what you did against Tennessee last week, how are you feeling going into this rematch with Oregon?
I'm feeling really good because even myself included didn't think that Tennessee game was going to go that way, right? I obviously knew we were going to win, or at least I picked us to win. But I thought it was going to be a way closer game. Tennessee's no joke. I mean, they play – I'm going to go ahead and say it, they play in the toughest, conference in football, right? I mean, you play literally the best teams you could ever possibly think of. And even the unranked teams in the SEC are good teams. So I was actually thoroughly surprised that they let us walk in there and stomp all over them. We stopped their whole run game. We stopped their whole pass game. They basically had nothing. They could do nothing. They did nothing. They couldn't even generate anything at any point in the game. And we were just kind of rolling. Will Howard threw for over 300 yards. Both our running backs, Henderson and Judkins, they both were good on the ground. Some scores. So, I mean, we were effective on both sides of the football, not just one, and our defense was just absolutely incredible. I mean, there's a reason why we are the number one defense in football, in college football, and they 100% showed it. I know there were some worries at the Michigan game, especially losing it like how we did. I know I was kind of worried, losing that game then coming into this. But I feel confident. I feel really good coming into this game after the thumping we gave Tennessee. So,
I mean, rightfully so. Yeah, that's a tough, like you said, you beat a tough Tennessee team that, goes through that SEC gauntlet that you mentioned, 42-17. It wasn't you just barely beat them. You beat them pretty good. That first half, shut down, and then the entire game as well. And then, but when you look at Oregon, they're coming off, like we said, they're sitting a week coming off of the Big Ten championship game where they beat Penn State 45-37 in a game that was a lot closer than I think what a lot of people thought it would be. And part of me wonders, what is feeding the favoring Ohio State, if you want to call it favoring. One is not that. I mean, that is negligible. That's a coin flip. Yeah. But I wonder, is it because it's hard to beat a team twice, or whatever it may be? But it's going to be an exciting game. I mean, we even talked about this. I think this probably should have been the night game on New Year's Day, comparative to the other game that we'll talk about here in a minute. But either way, this is easily one of the two best games out of the four this weekend. And I'm excited to watch this rematch. See Will Howard and Dillon Gabriel go, head to head again. Do we have a game where I want to say, was it Tez Johnson that was out of the game partway through?
Yeah.
Did he get ejected? Was he the one that got ejected for unsportsmanlike conduct and I think it was spitting on a player or something?
Yeah, he did.
So to see if he can come back again, what does he do in a full game? Because he's 78 receptions, 866 yards, 10 touchdowns on the year, and then on the ground, like you said, Jordan James, 226 carries, 1,253 yards, 15 touchdowns. Against that Ohio State defense, it should be another good rematch. I'm excited to watch this game. We already know who you're picking in this one. I think that's pretty easy. I mean, Oregon's 13-0, and I'm gonna go with the Ducks because show me you can beat them. I mean, they haven't lost anybody all year. It's tough to beat a team twice. I get that. But, they're undefeated for a reason. And if you guys beat them, I mean, it's going to be hard not to pick you the rest of the way through by beating a hard-nosed Tennessee team like you did. And then if you come in here and knock off the number 1 overall seed that's undefeated all year, it'll be a tall test, but it should be a heck of a game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% taking Ohio State. I think it's gonna be different this time. We had plenty of opportunities to win that Oregon game, and we didn't. And then we got out-coached at the end. Dan Lanning, did that smart whatever it was, little penalty or whatever, took time off the clock, and that basically ended the game. He even admitted to it after the game in his press conference. That was basically something that they had looked at doing because they knew it was going to draw time and everything, and they did it successfully. And he pulled the fast one on Ryan Day, so much so that the NCAA they made a rule that you can't do that anymore after that.
I was about to say now there's a rule, so
but he pulled, but that's listen, dude, it is what it is, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh, that was just luck. No, I mean we had chances to win, we didn't. Oregon played really well, and we got outcoached. Dan Lanning was a masterpiece, to be honest. I just don't think I don't know. Something just tells me that this is not going to go Oregon's way. I think it's going to be another close game. But I don't think sitting helped them at all, especially after we just if I'm Oregon and I've been sitting and I watched Ohio State absolutely thrash one of the better SEC teams like they did, I would be a little bit worried because we're fresh, we're motivated, we're energized, we have all the momentum, and you guys are coming off of nothing. You guys are just
coming off a close victory in the Big Ten championship game 3 weeks ago now.
Yeah, mark my words. This is what is going to. I feel like this is what is going to decide the game. If I had to guess, because Oregon sat right as any other team, I feel like they're going to get off to a slow start. And if we can capitalize on that, we will win the football game. The only thing that worries me with that is that Ohio State also likes to get off to a slow start every time. We don't like to, besides this Tennessee game, basically every other game has been a slow start. We kind of make some mistakes, a couple 3 and outs, and then we kind of start to pick up towards the end of the first half of football. Then we start to kind of build some momentum and some motivation and get some things rolling, and usually score right before halftime. But that can't happen. If Oregon starts off slow because they're a little rusty, that is your opportunity where you should come out like the Tennessee game and start thumping right away. If we can do that, I think that I feel pretty confident the game is over with. I just don't know how Oregon's going to come out to play and how we are. If we come play them like we played Tennessee, it's going to be a really interesting game. But if we get off to a slow start, per usual, it's probably going to be another 1-point game. It really is going to be. It's going to be a back and forth like it was the first time. It's just going to be what defense can make that final stop. Who is willing to go the extra yard, the extra inch, the extra mile, to try to win this game. So it's gonna be a dogfight through and through all game long, no matter what happens. I don't think anyone's getting blown out here. I don't think we're blowing out Oregon. I don't think that's happening. I don't think Oregon's blowing out Ohio State. It's gonna come down to who does what more. So
yeah, I agree. It's gonna be interesting to see what Ohio State does different in this game to come back. All that speed that Oregon has, because that's what they're known for. It's all having all that speed, at the running back, at the wide receiver, at the DBs, at your linebackers. Everybody's fast on this team. They build the game around speed, and to see, what do they go back to the drawing board? Watch that film from the first game, and what do they do here? And they and watch and see what Penn State did in the championship game to slow them down and kind of make it a closer game. So, like you said, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be an exciting game to watch, and I can't wait. And then rounding us out on New Year's night you have the other probably better game of the four, Georgia taking on Notre Dame in the All-State Sugar Bowl at the Caesar Superdome down in New Orleans at 8:45, getting kicked off. 12-1 Notre Dame having that one loss against NIU early in the season, fighting all the way back, winning out since that game, beating in-state school Indiana in the first round, kind of like we talked about with Oregon. Georgia sitting first round after they took care of business in the SEC championship game. They've had a few weeks. The big thing here in this game, and that's probably going to be one of the biggest X factors, is no Carson Beck for Georgia. That's going to be one of the biggest things. You've got Gunnar Stockton taking the helm for Georgia, as we talked about last week. Carson Beck, UCL surgery last week, should be back to throwing in the spring, but you're having to get your backup quarterback ready in 3 weeks or so to take on a tough Notre Dame team that looked pretty good last week. They've got a tough defense. The spread for this game opens up as Notre Dame favored by 1.5. And I can see the reasoning for that. You've got a backup quarterback for Georgia making his first start. Notre Dame coming off a big win against Indiana, coming up and just showing out. And, I think this is going to be another fun game to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of things that I feel like kind of factor in. Like, I know Notre Dame's 12-1. They had that loss early on, and me and you absolutely, whatever episode that was, we absolutely crucified them to lose to NIU at home. But job well done on coming back, playing really good every game, and making the run that they did. I just, my question is, how is Riley Leonard and that offense going to fare against Georgia's defense? Right, Georgia's defense, it's not the best defense that Georgia's had, but it's still Georgia. It's still an SEC defense, right? I mean, I would say they're one of the better defenses in SEC. I mean, they've had some bad losses, where they almost got blown out by Alabama, but they fought all the way back, made that a game, barely lost that one. They've beat Texas twice. So how is that Notre Dame offense going to find a way to overcome this hard-nosed, hard-hitting, fast, they're very fast, Georgia SEC defense? And listen, I know we're talking about Gunnar Stockton. Yeah, listen, I'm sure he's probably wishing that, his career at Georgia probably didn't start like this, right? But at the same time, what kind of player are you, right? Georgia just doesn't recruit, 2-star quarterbacks to come back up, right? Carson Beck, right? I'm sure this kid is probably a 5-star recruit out of somewhere, right? So they draft, they're like Alabama. They go get the best of the best players. So like, what kind of kid are you? What kind of player are you, right? You are now the leader of this Georgia team. What's it going to be? Are you going to, lay down and just kind of make your way through it? Or are you going to take it by the reins and try to overcome everything that you possibly can and try to win a national championship? What are you going to do? Because it's his time to shine now. And I'm sure with Kirby Smart, I'm sure he's had some time to work with him. I would say this kid's probably going to come out game ready, to be honest. I don't think Kirby Smart just drafts guys to be like, oh, we're only going to put you here, just because we need somebody. I'm sure this kid is a really good football player. I'm sure he's a really good quarterback, just not good enough to beat out Carson Beck, at least, in Kirby Smart's eyes. But I guarantee the kid can still sling a football. He's good enough. He's good enough to back up Carson Beck at Georgia. So he's good enough to play for Kirby Smart, who is probably the best coach in college football right now, to be honest. So I don't know. There's a lot of factors. Can Notre Dame overcome that defense? And then, like you said, what's Georgia's offense going to be like? Because Notre Dame's defense ain't no slack either. So how is he going to rise to the occasion, right? Are they all just going to rely on him, or is that team going to step up around him because they know that he's in a tough spot? So, people got to elevate their play.
Yeah. So if you look at it, I looked it up just some context here, like we were talking about. Gunnar Stockton was part of the 2022 signing class for Georgia. He was per 24/7 Sports, was a 4-star prospect, the number 7 quarterback in the class overall, the 11th player, the 11th best player in Georgia, and a top 110 overall national recruit. So it's like you said, they're not going to just recruit anybody, and he's a home state kid from Georgia. So has paid his dues, sat behind Carson Beck for a couple of years. Like you said, he probably didn't think that the college football playoffs was when his career at Georgia was going to begin. He maybe thought that might be next year, but I mean, when your number's called, it's time to step up. And like you said, maybe the team around him will help elevate their games to make it easier on him. And I'm sure that Kirby Smart's had him going through this playbook, through this offense, all the first team reps, getting him ready for this game. I'm sure he's probably been picking Carson Beck's brain, kind of just, talking to him. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I think the big thing here is, can Georgia come out and start fast under a quarterback getting his first start in the second round of college football playoffs? That's going to be big. So how does he handle that stage? And can they get started fast? And I think that's going to be one of the big factors. And like you said, that Notre Dame defense looked great last week. Riley Leonard in that offense, it looked pretty good last week as well. So it's going to be another tough test. I'm excited to watch this game. You could probably flip-flop this game and the other game for easily the best game of the second round here. I'm excited to watch it. I think it's going to be a good one. We'll go ahead and do our picks here. I'm going to take the dogs in this one. I think, I'm going to say Kirby Smart gets Gunnar Stockton ready. Like we say, he's a 4-star recruit, and that's not, anything to look past. And, maybe this is where the Gunnar Stockton era starts for Georgia, and he comes out and, looks like the 4-star he is and leads this Georgia team to victory.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not going to discredit Notre Dame at all, right? They could easily come in here and win this football game, right? They're in the college football playoffs for a reason. They played really well all year. But I'm gonna take the dogs here. Kirby Smart, I think two things that are probably going to solidify this is one, like you said, he knows what kind of player Gunnar is, right? He's not just some slack off the street. I would say Kirby Smart's probably got him ready, and he's probably created some sort of a playbook to help him ease into the game. He's not going to have this kid go out there and probably run the same plays that Carson Beck does right off the rip.
You shrink that playbook.
Yeah. We're not going to throw like 10, 50-yard bombs that are like, what I'm saying? Like, he's not going to have him go out there to start slinging the ball, 40 yards down the field. Like, he's probably got some plays to get Gunnar in a rhythm, right, into the game. But listen, Kirby Smart has been here. He's been here before. He's won national championships, right? This isn't new to him. And it's really hard to outcoach the best coach. So I would say with the team that Georgia is, especially with how they play in the playoffs and the coach that Kirby Smart is, I think that the dogs are going to be a little too much overall for Notre Dame to probably handle for 4 quarters. So I'm going to take Georgia here.
Yeah. Like you said, no discredit to Notre Dame. It should be a tough game. It's going to be one of those, I don't think it's a blowout. I think it's going to come down to it at the end, and it's going to be a fun one to watch. I'm excited. It should be a good round 2 of the college football playoffs to see who advances on to the Final Four here, as you've already whittled down from 12 teams to 8, and now you're going to go from 8 to 4. What matchups are you going to see? So that's going to be big. I'm excited to watch this, all these games, and see what happens. They should be some exciting things happen this weekend, or this week, as this is going to be, starting tomorrow and through Wednesday, New Year's Day. Be another good round of college football. And so before we get out of here, Dillon has a fun game for us to play. And it's going to be a tough one. So if you want to tell everybody what we're doing, we'll get at it.
All right. So I saw this thing. I thought it would be pretty cool, especially for this show. FanDuel, I guess they put it out there, and it was voted on. I don't know if it's voted on by the people. and their company, or if they put it out there for just people to vote on. But they made a bracket of the best college football teams since 2000. And there's 8 teams, and they put them on a bracket, and they put it out there to see who you think would win these matchups, and then what team probably is the best college football team since 2000, right? So I didn't want to do all 8 in one day, so I just did the first 2 matchups, right? So we'll start with matchup number 1, all right? I'm just going to read off some notable players on each team, their record. They obviously won national championships, right? I'm also just going to give you how many points they scored on offense, what they averaged a game, and how many points that they allowed other teams to score on them. And then you kind of just tell me, based on the information that I gave you, who do you think would win out of a matchup, right? So I think I already know who's probably going to win the whole thing, but we'll just go anyways. So the number 1 seed, all right, this is a number 1 versus number 8 seed, all right? So you have the 2001 Miami team versus the 2020 Alabama team, all right? So the 2001 Miami team, they're talked about as probably the great. I mean, there's documentaries on them, right? So you had teams on this team. You had people like, I had to list so many, like Ken Dorsey, Ed Reed, Willis McGahee, Frank Gore, Vince Wilfork, Clinton Portis, Andre Johnson, Jeremy Shockey, Bryant McKinney, and Jonathan Vilma are just some top key names on this. They went 12-0. They won everything. They scored 475 points throughout the year. They averaged 43.2 points a game, and they allowed a whopping 103 total points. That is 9.4 points a game that they allowed over the season. All right. They have them as a matchup against the 2020 Alabama team, who was led by primarily Mac Jones. Bryce Young was on there. Mac Jones was the quarterback. They had Brian Robinson Jr., Devontae Smith, John Mechie, Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle, and Patrick Surtain the second, probably one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Those are just some notable names. They went 13-0. They won the whole thing. 630 points scored, averaged 48.5 points a game, allowed 252 total points over the season, and that came out to be about 19.4 points a game. So based on just kind of the key players I gave you and what you know about both teams, if I was to put both those teams in a game against each other, who do you think wins that game?
Man, that's a fun one to think about. All those stars you listed out, guys that were legends in the NFL, that are currently playing in the NFL and having extreme success. This will be fun to just set it up and, simulate it in NCAA 25. That would be something interesting to see what happens. This is a tough one. That the big thing in that game, in this matchup that I would look at is, to me, I'm not sold on Mac Jones as a quarterback at Alabama. That's a factor for me. Yeah, he was lucky and he had all those weapons that he did, and that probably helped him have success. But you've kind of seen his career, how it's been in the NFL so far. Got drafted by New England, struggled a little bit there. Supposed to be the next guy up, replacing Tom Brady, if you want to call it replacing, getting let go or traded to Jacksonville, having to be the guy right now with Trevor Lawrence hurt. But those names you list off for Miami, I think, to me, you have to go with Miami in this one. That's just such a tough team. Like you said, there's documentaries about this team. So many legends, Hall of Fame names on that list that played and had such success at the NFL level. I would have to go with that Miami team.
Yeah, I was figured you were going to go with them. I think a lot of people will probably go with the 2001 Miami team. So the last matchup for the day is they have the 2013 Florida State team versus the 2005 Texas team. 2013 Florida State had names like Devontae Freeman, Rashad Green, Kelvin Benjamin, Jalen Ramsey, LaMarcus Joyner, Christian Jones, and Jameis Winston in his prime, right, in college. 2005 Texas team had names like Billy Pittman as their leading receiver, Aaron Ross, Brian Orakpo, Michael Huff, Vince Young, and Jamal Charles are just some notable names. 2013 Florida State, 14-0, 723 points scored, 51.6 points a game, only allowed 170 points total on the year, which comes out to be about 12.1 points a game. They obviously won the whole thing. 2005 Texas team, 13-0, also won everything. They scored 652 points all year long, 50.2 points a game. They allowed 213 points for the whole season. That came out to be about 16.4 points a game. And do not forget 2005 Texas. They also had that what is considered probably one of the greatest games of all time, where they beat USC in the Rose Bowl on a last-second touchdown, ran in, I believe, by no other than Vince Young himself. And that really, at least in my eyes, that is considered one of the best games ever be played in college. So, again, if I was to, just with the information that you know about those teams and some of those key players, if I was to put these two in a grudge match, face to face, who do you think would win?
See, that's the tough thing with these is, you're talking two different eras of college football.
Mm-hmm.
Great players on both sides of that. For Texas, for Florida State. Heck, Vince Young, what a heck of a college quarterback. Jamal Charles had a great career in the NFL. On the other side of that, Jameis Winston in his prime, like you said, was just crazy accurate, especially thinking about how he talked about, in an interview, I think within the last year or so, or maybe back at the end of his career at Tampa Bay, having vision correction surgery, and talking about how he didn't have great vision, and said that he threw to colors, like the certain colors. And Kelvin Benjamin, great receiver for a couple of years with Carolina. Some other great players on that Florida State team.
Look at Devontae Freeman too.
Devontae Freeman, can't forget about him.
He was a staple for the Falcons on their offense for a long time. So, and even Jalen Ramsey, he's
still playing.
Probably one of the best cornerbacks to play football. So,
heck of a matchup this would be. Just the fact that I think for me back then it was a tougher, hard-nosed football. I've got to go with that Texas team, just because, like you said, arguably one of the best games in college football they played in against USC with Reggie Bush. You can't forget that they beat a Reggie Bush-led USC team that come down to the wire. So, the older teams to me so far are taking this and winning both these matchups with, that 2001 Miami team and then this 2005 Texas team. It's just tough because it's two different eras of college football. Things were a lot more looser then, if you will. You have a lot more freedom, a lot more hard hitting that wasn't necessarily, if you would do it now, you get flagged or ejected from the games. They let a lot more go, if you will. So, I think that 2005 Texas team would win this matchup.
I would have to agree. So that's what I have for the first breakdown. Next week, just so you have a little bit of thinking room. Next week, it is going to be the 2019 LSU team versus the 2008 Florida team. And then we also have the 2004 USC team versus the 2018 Clemson team. So good matchups there, especially we're talking about Tim Tebow and we're talking about Tim Tebow and Joe Burrow and some of these guys. So
Justin Jefferson,
a lot of these teams were a lot of these teams were star-studded. So I'll have some information on those games next week, and we'll break those down too.
Yeah, that should be another good, fun discussion. I can't wait to see who we're talking about that's in the next round of the playoffs as well. Do you see the Ducks continue their undefeated season? Does Ohio State get over that and make their way? Do they get past that ugly loss at the end of the season over Michigan? Does Boise State and Ashton continue to roll like they did over Penn State? That this is probably one of the better Penn State teams in the the last few years. Does this battle-tested Texas team take care of business against Arizona State, or does Arizona State continue to prove they belong in the playoffs? And then can the backup quarterback for Georgia get it done against the tough Notre Dame team? All those questions will be answered this week as those playoffs get kicked off tomorrow, starting with the Boise State-Penn State game tomorrow night. Then you'll have things getting kicked off at noon on New Year's Day with Texas and Arizona State. So it should be a fun weekend of college football, or a fun week of college football. I keep saying weekend, but it's in the middle of the week. And we'll be right back here next Monday to recap all that for you, talk about it, kind of do a brief preview of that next round games as we're getting closer and closer to crowning a champion for the first year of this 12-team college football playoff. So until next Monday, we're going to get out of here and enjoy watching these fantastic games starting tomorrow afternoon.